What comes to mind when you hear the name Chad? Allow me to guess. Charming, charismatic, and facial perfection. But there's something more. White. Yes, that's the stereotype. White skin, westernized, Eurocentric. Yet, I see a world of color. It's time to redefine what it means to be a Chad. In a world with hundreds of unique phenotypes where only a fraction of the world's population is of Caucasian descent, it's a grievous mistake that people believe that their ethnicity must align with the conventional Chad to succeed. Welcome to Chadify, where every ethnicity possesses the potential for Chadification. If you want to get your face analyzed with looks-maxing suggestions and Chadification done to your own unique circumstance, taking your ethnicity into consideration, check out the link in the description, chadify.me. Approximately 200,000 years ago, the modern human species, Homo sapiens, emerged in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we embark on a journey that commences on the very soil that birthed human existence. We will not only explore each ethnicity, but also consider how to enhance one's appearance based on it. Each path here signifies the unique routes humans took as they traveled across Earth, color-coded by each continent. The countdown at the bottom of the screen indicates the current year being displayed. Our individual genetics and heritage play a significant role in shaping our physical appearance. Ethnicity matters because people from diverse backgrounds exhibit varying traits, necessitating tailored looks-maxing protocols. Standard rating criteria, like the conventional Chad rating system, faces challenges when applied to individuals from distant regions outside of Europe. In fact, even across Asia, faces can display strikingly different appearances. One size doesn't fit all, and at Chadify, we recognize this reality. In our previous installments of this series, we delved into the realm of male facial attractiveness across the continents of Africa and Europe. Rather than simplistically categorizing these regions as single races solely defined by the labels of black and white, I developed a more accurate approach that recognizes the diverse array of phenotypes present on each continent. But what even is a phenotype? Well, a phenotype is a set of observable characteristics of an organism, which is determined by genetics and influenced by the environment. When two or more different phenotypes exist in the same population of a species, the species is now called polymorphic. We are, as humans, polymorphic. There are 4 different types of phenotypic traits. The first being morphological phenotypic traits, which are physical traits that are observable. In humans, traits like height, eye color, and other facial features. Physiological phenotypic traits are the internal aspects of an organism. Ethological phenotypic traits include the organism's behavior, and biochemical phenotypic traits involve the chemical composition of an organism's body. We're primarily concerned with morphology. There are 17 morphological phenotypic traits involved in our analysis, each varying significantly across phenotypes, precisely delineating their appearances. And there are hundreds of unique phenotypes, but we will be focusing on the main 45 of them. As you can see, this complexity surpasses the conventional categorization of a handful of races. In this video, we transition to our exploration of Oceania and Southeast Asia, finding a parallel to our observations back in Africa and Europe. Here too, faces are frequently oversimplified, but this time under the umbrella term Asian. We're gonna zoom in to our first phenotype. Wow. There he is. Contrary to popular belief, facial attractiveness is an objective and scientific process, but it is heavily nuanced by multiple factors. Despite the difficulty in creating and defining Chads, it is possible. The following relationships must be satisfied. First of all, facial averageness. Morphing images from various individuals within a specific group can create a representation of facial averageness for that region. And a great example is what this guy did here. These are 6 different individuals which average together to create this guy. Objectively, from my own analysis, the guy in the middle is the most attractive by far out of the 6 of them, yet all 6 of those guys are not attractive. So when you put it all together, you end up with a very attractive face. So I can go and I can target a specific phenotype and average together hundreds of faces to create a great looking, attractive face from the region. However, that is not enough to fully tap out facial attractiveness, which leads us to chatification. Modifying an averaged face by enhancing its dimorphic traits and overall aesthetic markers results in a chatified phenotype. And that is how I created 45 and counting Chad phenotypes of the world. Our initial phenotype is the Australid phenotype Chad. This group is recognized as Aboriginal or Native Australians, representing the original inhabitants of Australia. In contrast, the emergence of the blonde surfer guy stereotype occurred following the transportation of convicts from Britain, Ireland, and other parts of Europe to establish penal colonies. Essentially, these prisoners were sent to Australia because Britain had limited room in their jails at the time. This is a key takeaway here because, in contrast, the Australid phenotype likely diverged from one of the early out-of-Africa migrations before the split between Europeans and East Asians. Consequently, Australids exhibit a variety of ancient features in terms of facial appearance due to this early migration. Mandawi Yunu Pingu, an Aboriginal Australian educator, musician, and ambassador, won the 1992 Australian of the Year award. He was honored for building bridges of understanding between the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people through his work. This included developing a progressive curriculum that integrated Western and Aboriginal knowledge, as well as founding the band Yothu Yindi in 1986. Yunu Pingu is an excellent example of the Australid phenotype. You can really see how his facial structure resembles it. This image here depicts an Aboriginal Australian male adorned with the traditional red headband and white body paint. Red ochre, a significant pigment in Aboriginal culture, is frequently utilized in headbands, art, and ceremonial practices. Red embodies the earth and life force, while white signifies purity and connection to the ancestral realm in Australid culture. Ochre has been mined by Aboriginal people in quarries and pits across Australia for many thousands of years. Incorporating elements from the style of your nearest human phenotype is an essential tool for enhancing your overall appearance. On to the analysis of the Australid phenotype Chad. First of all, their skin tone is between medium and dark brown. Secondly, they have a high quantity of body hair. Thirdly, their hair texture is wavy to tight curls. Did you know that Aboriginal Australians can naturally have blonde hair? This distinctive trait is due to a variation in the TYRP1 gene. Unlike the genes that cause blonde hair in Europeans, this mutation is unique to Aboriginal Australians and the surrounding Melanesian islands. Furthermore, their eye color is typically a dark brown hue, with eye dimensions of 3:1. Additionally, the Australid has very deep-set eyes with almond eye proportions and an extremely low eye-eyebrow distance, which provides a relatively masculine appearance. Their eyes rarely have epicanthic folding, and their eyes are a little bit close-set and large in size. How does this happen? Their eye separation ratio is only 93% of one eye width apart, insinuating closer set eyes. Secondly, their ES ratio is 0.47, which means that their eye size must be large to cause this 93%. The Australid has a platyrrhine to sometimes hyperplatyrrhine nose. This means that they have a relatively wide set nose with a nasal index of 87. This measurement is the width divided by the length. In some cases, the width will actually be higher than the length for the Australids. Additionally, Australids have extremely high brow ridge projection. This means that their supraorbital arches are very developed, as you can see on the right here. However, their nasal projection is rather moderate. It is less than a typical European's. They have a cranial height which is between cami and orthocranic, meaning that their skull length is a little bit short. Additionally, they have a cephalic ratio that is dolichocephalic to brachycephalic. What does this mean? It means that they're shallow to deep skulled. Additionally, they're euryprosopic with a facial index of 81%, meaning that they have a broad face. Moving on, they have a longer mid-face of 1.08 to 1. This works for their given phenotype, and it is partly due to something we're going to dive into in a moment. Additionally, the Australids have full lips, and they have a long philtrum. This is partly why their mid-face is a little bit on that longer side, because their chin-philtrum ratio is 1.65 to 1. They have slightly round cheekbones, and they have a slightly above average height, but they're brachycephalic, meaning that they have very long legs and short torsos. Finally, Australids are typically small to medium framed. Now we dive into the masculine all the way over to the more pretty boy version of the Australid phenotype. Whether an Australid is masculine, feminine, or somewhere in the middle, they are all equally attractive in different ways. Many people will prefer the more masculine, many people will also prefer more of a pretty boy counterpart. The idea here is that men exist on a spectrum of attractiveness, and there is some personal preference associated with what makes someone more attractive than another. I have a full video on this called The Ultimate Guide to Looks Maxing for Your Masculinity. It has over 275,000 views because the information is invaluable and ageless. This information will be relevant forever. Introducing the Melanesid phenotype Chad, which is a dominant type in Papua New Guinea and the Melanesian Islands. The name derives from Melas, Greek, meaning black, and Nasos, meaning island. This phenotype likely developed through various migrations from Southeast Asia between 40,000 and 2000 BC, and tends to be far shorter in height than the Australid. Michael Somar was a prominent political figure in Papua New Guinea, strongly featuring the Melanesid phenotype. He served as the country's first prime minister after it gained independence from Australia in 1975. A huli wigman refers to a traditional ceremonial performer from the huli people of the Southern Highlands in Papua New Guinea. The huli are known for their unique and elaborate customs, including intricate rituals and dances with significant cultural ties. On to the facial analysis of the Melanesid phenotype Chad. Well, first of all, they have a darker skin tone than the Australids. Secondly, they have moderate to high quantity of body hair, which is a little bit dialed back from the Australid phenotype. Thirdly, they have wavy to tight curly hair, and they have a hair color which can range all the way from blonde to brown, black, and even sometimes ginger. Like Aboriginal Australians, Melanesid phenotype people also have a high likelihood of possessing the TYRP1 blonde hair gene. This means that their hair color can go anywhere from ginger or blonde to a dark brown or black hair color. Take a look at these two Melanesid phenotype children on the left, with their epic blonde hair, which almost looks similar to Heath Ledger's hair in A Knight's Tale. Additionally, they have an eye color which is dark brown, and eye dimensions which are 3.15 width to 1 length. They're slightly deep set with an almond near squinted appearance. Additionally, the Melanesid phenotype Chad has a low eye-eyebrow distance similar to the Australid. There's a lot of connections between these two phenotypes, yet they are distinct. For example, they have less brow development than the Australid phenotype. They uncommonly have Mongolian folding of the eye, but it's a little bit more common than the Australid due to some East Asian admixture. And they have an eye spacing of 98% of one eye width apart and an ES ratio of 0.47, meaning that they have average spacing, neither close set nor wide set eyes. Additionally, they have a nasal index of 90, meaning that they have a platy rind or wide-set nose. They have moderate nasal projection, and they're hypsocranic, also meaning tall-skulled. The Melanesid phenotype has a cephalic ratio which is between 75 and 80% of the head breadth to head depth, meaning that they have an average depth. Additionally, they're euryprosopic with an 83% facial index, insinuating a broad face width. Boom, summarized. The Melanesid phenotype Chad has a slightly longer mid-face of 1.04 to 1. Additionally, they have full lips and a long philtrum of 1.65 to 1, again connected slightly to the longer mid-face. They have wide jaw development, and they're very short to medium in height. Pictured here is Tony Robbins in Papua New Guinea. They're much shorter than him, but they do have these incredible jawlines and development that is associated with their phenotype. It's very cool to see this in perspective and the lighter hair that many of them possess. In some instances, their very short stature rivals that of African pygmies. But there's one key difference here, and it's that they have a very balanced torso to leg length. Unlike pygmies with really stubby legs and long torsos, the Melanesids are very much proportional. Finally, they're small to large framed, meaning that they have a wide range of body types. In fact, they're even brachycephalic to a degree, meaning that they have a shorter torso. So we have the more masculine Melanesid phenotype Chad all the way over to the more pretty boy counterpart. Again, equally attractive in different and unique ways. Here it is summarized. Again, it's really interesting to see how the dimorphic traits of their faces vary. For example, the jaw structure of the masculine phenotype is much larger than the more feminine or pretty boy version. Additionally, other traits like philtrum length or even nose breadth will vary. Back to our map. Our third phenotype is the Toalid phenotype Chad, which is the easternmost subtype of the Vedoid group and is considered the oldest surviving type in the Sunda or Sunda Islands. While it was more widespread historically, its prevalence has likely diminished or diluted over time due to the genetic spread and influence of the South Mongolid phenotype. This is Malaysia here, so not too much in Malaysia, rather it's more in Indonesia, a bit of Malaysia here, in the Philippines. Since this is a prevalent phenotype of Indonesia, the quintessential men's attire for significant events, be it a wedding or a formal ceremony, comprises a traditional sarong paired with a batik shirt. Batik shirts are emblematic of Indonesian men's attire, created through a detailed process of waxing and dyeing fabric to form unique, slightly floral, yet at the same time abstract patterns. It almost looks like they have wheat or dotted kind of specks, because they almost have a similarity to a Hawaiian shirt, yet they're different. It is a bit difficult to locate a specific celebrity or well-known person of this phenotype due to the high amounts of admixture amongst most celebrities from Indonesia. Instead, I decided to showcase a textbook example of a Toalid male from Toraja, Indonesia. Just take a look at his face and compare him to our phenotype Chad. They both possess extremely similar characteristics, notably a slightly curlier or wavy hair texture despite a more East Asian appearance. The Toalid phenotype has a medium to dark brown skin tone, and they have a low quantity of body hair, partly due to their East Asian admixture, diluting the hairiness of the Melanesid phenotype. Additionally, their hair texture is wavy to curly with a black hair color. They do not possess the blonde hair gene from the Melanesid and Australid phenotypes. Additionally, they have dark brown eye color, and they have eye dimensions which are 3.4 to 1, meaning that they have squinty eye proportions which are middle set, and the reason you can tell it's middle set from this specific photo here is there's a lack of shading above the eye area. This means that they're not as deep set. They have frequent Mongolian folding, which is not a surprise considering they're a Southeast Asian phenotype, and they have 100% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing, as well as an ES ratio of 0.476, meaning that they have average spacing of the eyes. The Toalid phenotype has a nasal index of 85, meaning they have a palatine or wide set nose. Additionally, they have low projection of their nose, which is often depressed or concave. They're hypsocranic, meaning they're tall skulled, with a round occipital bone at the back of the skull there. Their cephalic ratio is mesocephalic to brachycephalic. This means that they have shallow to average depth of the skull, and additionally they're euryprosopic with an 80% facial index. The length is 80% of the width of their face, meaning that they have a broad face. Additionally, they have a slightly longer mid-face of 1.06 to 1 and average lip size. The Toalids have a long philtrum of 1.8 to 1. I think we're starting to see a trend here that if you have a slightly longer mid-face, a lot of the time in Asian and Oceanic phenotypes, this corresponds with a longer philtrum. In Europe, many phenotypes can have a longer mid-face and still have a long chin relative to their philtrum, meaning that they can have a different relationship than these phenotypes here. They have medium jaw width and they have short stature. They're macro to mesoscelic, meaning they have a slightly long torso. And then finally, the Toalids are small framed. Here is the more masculine Toalid all the way over to the more pretty boy counterpart, all equally attractive with differing amounts of dimorphism. I'll let you guys pause it here so you can analyze the differences between each of them. Next, the Negritid phenotype Chad. This ancient South Asian type likely arrived with an early out of Africa migration via oceanic routes. Arriving in this region much earlier than some other oceanic phenotypes, the Negritid is frequently mistaken for African descent by the untrained eye. This underscores the significance of educating people about this distinction, especially considering the fact that their geographic location is literally on the opposite side of the world. They're not remotely African. The Negritid subtype found in the Andaman Islands, known as the Andamanid, represents its purest genetic form. Unfortunately, their numbers are decreasing due to factors such as disease, genetic assimilation, and other influences. You can really see how at a glance someone may mistake an Andamanese male as African genetically. However, it becomes very obvious when studying their nasal structure and eyes that they are a completely unique phenotype. North Sentinel Island is renowned for its inhabitants, the Sentinelese people, who are of the broader Negritid phenotype, or rather the subtype called Andamanid, and have remained isolated from modern civilization for centuries. The island first came to global attention when a survey vessel sighted it in 1771. It wasn't until the late 19th century that an expedition led by Maurice Vital Portman, a British colonial administrator, landed on the island to study the indigenous people. During this expedition, an elderly couple and 4 children were taken to Port Blair, where the adults unfortunately succumbed to illness due to their unadapted immune systems. The children were subsequently returned to the island with gifts. However, this was not enough to prevent a fraught relationship, prompting India to cease attempts at contact in 1997 and declare a policy of non-interference in 2005. So, they have dark brown to black skin tone. In some cases, they can be as dark as the Nilotic phenotype of Africa. They have low quantity of body hair, and they have a kinky hair texture, meaning it's very curly, basically an afro. Additionally, they have black hair color, and they have a dark brown eye color, with proportions of 2.5 to 1, meaning that they have a slightly rounder almond eye shape with middle set eyes. They have frequent Mongolian folds, and they have an eye spacing of 112.5% of one eye width apart, and an ES ratio of 0.49, meaning that they have slightly wide set eyes due to the higher ES ratio and small eye size due to a high percentage of eye separation. The Negritid phenotype has a platyrhine nose with a nasal index of 95, meaning it's almost as wide as it is long, and they have a low nasal projection. Pictured here is an Andamanese male showcasing this trait. He is extremely attractive Andamanese male, pretty much bordering on the Chad realm of facial attractiveness for this given region, with an excellent jaw, amazing nasal structure, lip size, defined vermilion border of the lips, and just an overall pleasant appearance. Additionally, they're hypsocranic or tall-skulled, and they're brachycephalic, meaning they're shallow-skulled. Additionally, they're euryprosopic, meaning that they have a broad face. Here it is summarized. Furthermore, they have a compact mid-face of 1 length to 1 width and relatively full lips. The Negritid phenotype Chad has a chin philtrum ratio of 1.6 chin length to 1 philtrum length, This means that they have a very long philtrum, and they have a wide jaw with a weak chin, which is sometimes a little bit recessed. As a result, this phenotype gets some leeway in terms of chin projection. The Negritid phenotype is very short to short in height, and they're mesoscelic with a balanced torso length. Finally, they're small to large in frame size with a wide range. Here's the more masculine Negritid phenotype Chad all the way over to the more pretty boy counterpart, equally attractive with differing amounts of dimorphism. Take a note of how even the eye structure and how deep set they are varies with dimorphism. Back to our map. Flying all the way over to Polynesia next, we encountered the Polynesid phenotype Chad. This is the most common phenotype of the Pacific Islanders who inhabit a vast area stretching from Melanesia to Easter Island in Hawaii. This type likely resulted from various Southeast Asian migrations during the Neolithic period. Today, the islands exhibit more admixture due to recent European discovery and migration to the areas. This graph illustrates the chronological dispersal of the Austronesian people across the Pacific, providing valuable insights into the Polynesid phenotype and its genetic heritage. The origin has been disputed, being that there's many different models that may or may not explain how they came into existence. Whether it's the out of India or out of Taiwan models, they have all been discussed. Of course, this is an approximation because this is very complicated. First of all, we can see that the style of the Polynesid phenotype, the Hawaiian shirt, is absolutely imperative. In terms of culture, the haka is a traditional Maori dance from New Zealand, characterized by vigorous movements, stamping of the feet, rhythmic shouting, swaying of the body, and slapping of the chest and thighs, often accompanied by sticking out the tongue in a violent manner. Here is a video of the haka being performed at a New Zealand Maori wedding, which went viral a few years ago. Here's a familiar face, Dwayne Johnson. Believe it or not, his mother, Atamaivia, is a fully Polynesid Samoan. This means that Dwayne Johnson is not fully African. Rather, he's half Polynesian, half African. Yet no one seems to talk about this. And is very important because it has some implications later, which we will discuss. Additionally, another familiar person, Jason Momoa, who's half Polynesian as well. His father, Joseph Momoa, is a fully Hawaiian man, being of the Polynesid phenotype. You can tell how his father resembles the Polynesid phenotype even closer than his son. On to the analysis of the Polynesid phenotype Chad. First of all, they have a medium brown skin tone. It just looks like they have a constant tan. Secondly, they have a low quantity of body hair. Thirdly, they have fine hair texture, which is straight to wavy in appearance. Additionally, their hair color is brown to black, and they have a light to dark brown eye color. There's a bit of a range here. Additionally, they have a 3.2 width to 1 length of the eye, meaning that they have squinty eye proportions, which are middle set. And they have frequent Mongolian folding of the eye. You can see how the Polynesid, the Toalid, and Negritid phenotypes have frequent Mongolian folding. Additionally, they have average eye spacing of 100% of one eye width apart and an ES ratio of 0.46, the lowest in this region. And they have a mesorrhine nose, meaning it has medium nose width with a nasal index of 80 being the width as a percentage of the length. Additionally, they have low to medium projection of the nose. Additionally, they're hypsocranic with a high skull height, and they're mesocephalic, meaning that they have an average skull depth. Additionally, they're mesoprosopic with an 84%, meaning that they have a medium face width. Additionally, the Polynesid phenotype has a relatively compact midface of 1.03 to 1 and a lip size which is average. They have a balanced chin philtrum ratio of 2.3 to 1 and a wide, robust chin and jaw, which is very developed. They're tall and they're mesoscelic, meaning they have an average torso length. Finally, they're medium to very wide framed. Showcased here are photographs from the renowned Italian photographer Gianpaolo Barbieri, published in 1989 by Fabri Editor. This work is an anthropological exploration of the customs, traditions, meanings, and history of the Polynesian Tahitian people, who are often tattooed for spiritual and social status reasons. As you can see, the Polynesian phenotype has a predisposition to muscular size. Here's another photograph, basically doing the Z's pose with a spear of some sort. Many people know of Akabono Taro, a former professional sumo wrestler from Waimanolo, Hawaii. There is a genetic basis to muscular size in Polynesian people. This can be traced back to a genetic legacy shaped by the founder effect, where a small gene pool led to a prevalence of certain traits, which also has a connection to the island rule. Basically, what the island rule states is that where food is scarce, species adapt to a much smaller size on average, whereas where food is plentiful and abundant, they adapt to be much larger. For Polynesian people, the food was relatively plentiful, resulting in potentially a predisposition to becoming larger framed humans. Additionally, the CRE-BRF gene variant, which is notable in the Polynesian phenotype population, has an influence on both stature and health. While this variant is unfortunately associated with an increased risk of obesity, it also contributes to the larger physique characteristic of Pacific Islanders and provides a defense against type 2 diabetes. Now here we go, masculine Polynesian phenotype Chad to a more pretty boy archetype. I feel like Brock from Pokemon almost had the Polynesian phenotype appearance. Again, all extremely attractive males. They vary in dimorphism, meaning some people are going to look at the pretty boy and think he's more attractive than the masculine guy. But as highlighted in my masculinity video, all of them are equally attractive in different ways. So what phenotype are you? This is a very important question, because if you do not know what your phenotype is, then you don't really understand your ancestry. Furthermore, you have no clue what to do going forward in terms of looks maxing, because every phenotype has a different looks maxing strategy which must be employed going forward. If you want to improve your looks, here's a quick breakdown of what my website includes. First of all, you get a face rating out of 10 with detailed analysis, looks maxing suggestions, and one chat-fied photo, including a morph video which showcases your before and after transformation. All of this is done while taking your masculinity, which ranges between males, and your phenotype or ethnicity into consideration. I have add-ons. My first is adding more chat-fied images. Many people want not only their front view chatified, but the side profiles and other angles. Also have a quick delivery option here, which allows you to get your results under 24 hours. And of course, for the people who want the craziest detail, I also offer a full private video. Here we go to my favorite part of this video, where we zoom out and see all the Southeast Asian phenotypes as well as the oceanic ones. I love how the animation can showcase the shifting hair color of these phenotypes. It is most definitely one of the coolest things I've ever animated. Alright, so here we are at a comparison of the morphological phenotypic traits of the southeastern phenotypes as well as the oceanic ones. But there's a visitor. You may ask who this visitor is. Well, he's none other than the stereotypical Chad. Skin tone, boom. So we're really seeing here that the Negritid phenotype has the darkest skin. Some of these people can be literally almost as dark as the Nilotic people in Africa. Out of all these phenotypes, they're predominantly brown-skinned, but not black. Their hue is somewhere in the middle. The Toalid and the Australid are typically kind of similar, despite the Toalid having a more yellowy or orange skin tone versus the Australid. The Polynesid has a much lighter skin tone than the rest of them. Of course, stereotypical Chad is going to be the whitest. On to body hair, guys. So the stereotypical Chad is a pretty hairy guy, but the Australid and the Melanesid also have a decently high quantity of body hair. These guys are the pure oceanic phenotypes, as well as the Polynesid. However, the Polynesid has a lot of East Asian admixture due to their migratory route they took to inhabit those islands. Moving on to hair texture. Boom. So there's a big range with all phenotypes in terms of hair texture. The stereotypical Chad, we all know. Chads with curly hair and Chads with very straight hair. That's common. And it's the same thing with the Polynesid. In fact, the Polynesid, despite looking almost like a East Asian, they typically have a relatively wavy to curlier hair appearance with a range. People that are purely from the Cynid phenotype, which is the phenotype predominantly in China, would not have this and would be much more confined to fine, straight hair at the bottom here. The Melanesid and the Australid, due to being much more genetically distant from these phenotypes, typically have much curlier hair, which is kinky in texture. Of course, the Negritid comes at the very top with almost peppercorn hair similar to the Coid and Sanid phenotypes of Africa. Hair color. As mentioned earlier, the Australid and the Melanesid phenotypes have this genetic allele, which allows for them to have blonde hair in a different way than the stereotypical Chad. So as a result, they have a massive range, anywhere from literally orange or red hair all the way to black hair. This genetic trait is not prevalent in these other phenotypes. The Polynesid has a little bit of variance. Of course, stereotypical Chad is on a spectrum similar to the Australid and Melanesid. However, the Australid and Melanesid arguably have a wider range of hair colors than even the stereotypical Chad. Onto eye color. Boom. So this light hair color anomaly of the Australid and Melanesid phenotypes is not prevalent for eye color, as they have typically dark brown eyes. Same with the Toalid and the Negritid, with even darker brown eyes. The Polynesid phenotype can sometimes have hazel or even just slightly green eye color. Some people are going to go in the comments and say, well, I know a guy that's actually half Australian with light eyes, or I know a guy that's Polynesian fully and he has blue eyes. The thing about this is mutations exist, recessive genes exist in these populations. There's definitely an argument to be made that that would be true, but I'm not talking about the exceptions here, I'm talking about the norm. I want everyone to understand that. The Australid, the Melanesid, the Toalid, the Negritid, these phenotypes can have lighter eyes sometimes, but is very rare. Eye dimensions. The Negritid phenotype has the roundest eye appearance. They don't have as compact eye orbitals than these phenotypes here. Of course, this is a chatified phenotype, so the eye orbital structure will be a bit more conducive to a more squinted appearance than many of the people in those regions. However, it's going to be much rounder on average than these other phenotypes here, including the stereotypical Chad, which has a slightly squinty almond eye shape appearance. The Polynesid phenotype, the Toalid phenotype, these two phenotypes have a lot of East Asian admixture, which had resulted in this appearance. Eye folds. This is directly connected to that, but yes, the Toalid and the Polynesid phenotype, they have regular Mongolian folding. Interestingly, the Negritid phenotype also has this situation going on, and this is a key differentiator between the Negritid phenotype and many of the African phenotype Chads. The thing about African phenotype Chads is they can have folding of the eye, however, it's more related to their own continent of Africa. Take, for instance, the Coid and Sanid phenotypes of South Africa. They have the Hottentot or curtain folds for their upper eyelid. The Negritid phenotype does not contain this type of folding and is rather more related to the Mongolian folding of East Asia. Boom. Eye spacing. So the stereotypical Chad and the Polynesid Chad, they both have the typical eye spacing. This would be close set, up here would be wide set. And the Negritid phenotype has a dotted line. What does that mean? They have a condition which is not met from our 2D axis here. Although their eyes are typically a bit wide set, they're actually small in size. While the Australid has a unique situation in its own case, as their eyes are typically close set and large in size. That's why the dotted line around this guy is wider than the dotted line for the Negritid. Nasal index. Boom. Unsurprisingly, the stereotypical Chad has this thinnest nose, but this is not the optimal situation for every phenotype. The Polynesid phenotype has a relatively medium to wide set nose. We come to the Negritid phenotype, and interestingly, again differing from Africa, although they have a relatively wide set nose with a higher nasal index, the range is actually quite large. And this means that in many cases, the Negritid phenotype can have a slightly narrower nasal index. However, there's a bit of a range there as well. The Melanesid even wider of a nose, and the Australid quite wide as well. You can see it all zoomed in here. One of the interesting things also about the nasal structure of these groups is that it does look different from Africa. They have a relatively rounder tip, but the nostril structure is also rounder as well, which creates this very unique bulbous but wide appearance. Nasal projection. Boom. Unsurprisingly, the stereotypical Chad has a projecting nose. Polynesid, low to medium, Negritid low, Toalid very low, the Melanesid is somewhere in that middle area, and the Australid in the middle area as well. Skull breadth. Boom. The Negritid phenotype actually can have some of the widest faces or skulls on the planet. However, there's always a range with this morphological phenotypic trait, which is noted in multiple anthropological studies. Ultimately, skull breadth is not the best key differentiator between phenotypes because it ranges so much in a case-by-case basis in populations. That is why the stereotypical Chad has such a massive range here. Of course, East Asian and Oceanic phenotypes typically do have wider faces, mid-face ratio. Boom. So we're seeing again that this mid-face ratio situation varies far more than we previously and initially assumed. Although the stereotypical Chad typically has the exact 1-to-1 ratio within reason, the Australid phenotype can have a slightly longer mid-face than the stereotypical Chad, which ranges all the way down to the 1-to-1 area. This is similar to skull breadth. It does vary. However, on average, many of these phenotypes here have longer mid-faces. Lip size. Boom. The Melanesid has definitely full lips. The Negritid phenotype has relatively full lips, and then the Toalid, Polynesid, stereotypical Chad, they're all kind of in that average lip size. Chin to philtrum ratio. On the top, we have the numerator, which is the chin, and then we divide by the philtrum. When you have a long chin, your chin philtrum ratio, as a result, will be higher. That is the case with the stereotypical Chad and the Polynesian to a degree. However, many people will either have a shorter chin or a longer philtrum. And in the case of the Negritid, they do typically have a much shorter chin and a longer philtrum, resulting in a shorter chin philtrum ratio. The Toalid is similar, but a little bit less severe, and the Melanesid and Australid have the same situation as the Negritid. However, they don't have shorter chins, they simply have extremely long philtrums, which is causing this chin philtrum ratio to become very extreme on the low end. Height. Boom. The Negritid is one of the shortest populations on the entire planet, rivaling that of the Pygmies, with the only difference being they're relatively proportional despite being tiny in size. The Toalid and the Melanesid are also very short populations. The Polynesid and the Australid are actually even taller than the stereotypical Chad on average. And this connects into our next morphological phenotypic trait, which is frame. The Polynesian phenotype in particular has a very well-built, big frame. And we've discussed this earlier in the video if you want to check it out again. The stereotypical Chad is in the middle, and the remaining phenotypes range from slightly smaller framed to very small framed in the case of the Negritid and Toalid. After investing more than 6 months into research and development, my initial vision of creating a singular, comprehensive video on ethnicity became impractical. We're gonna have to break this series up into multiple parts. The ultimate map to male facial attractiveness. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.